Turn to page 12 for the explanation of the irons. The stance for the long irons is shown in picture 1.
With the 2 and 3 irons, the ball is positioned approximately the same as for the woods, slightly to the left of center. The stance is square. Both feet touch a line parallel to the intended line of flight.
The position for 4, 5, and 6 irons is shown in picture 2.
With the mid-irons, the ball is positioned just off a spot midway between the feet. The stance is still square.
Now look at page 13. The stance for the short irons is shown in picture 3.
With the short irons, the ball is positioned to the right of center. The stance is slightly open. That is, the left foot is withdrawn from the line of flight.
Picture 4 shows the start of the backswing.
As with the woods, the backswing is started with the hands. They take the club head away from the ball on a straight line for at least 12 inches parallel to the ground.
Turn to page 14. Picture 5 shows Arnold at the top of his swing.
At the top of the swing, the head is held steady over the ball. This will help you maintain accuracy in the swing. Remember, accuracy is what you are after, not power.
Picture 6 shows Arnold at the start of the downswing.
At the start of the downswing, your weight shifts completely from your right side to your left. The body has begun to turn from right to left, bringing the hands into a hitting position.
Look at page 15. Picture 7 shows Arnold at the moment of impact.
As you make contact with the ball, try to hit down on it. Don't try to loft the ball. Let the loft of the club face do the work for you.
Well, Arnie, I've noticed that you've put the woods back in the bag. How about hitting a few iron shots for me now?
All right, Chris. How about some long irons to start with?
Good idea. Say, Arnie, with the irons, is there any particular action during the swing itself that differs from the swing you'd use, let's say, with the woods?
Well, Chris, there certainly is, and of course, one of the most important things in hitting the irons in comparison to the woods is the fact that we're hitting down on the ball now, and this becomes a very important factor in hitting a good iron shot.
Well, what's the most common mistake with the long irons?
Well, of course, the average player tries to hit the ball a little too hard with these irons, and of course, with the just the little bit of loft that's on these irons, they have a tendency to try to pick the ball or hit it up in the air, which really isn't necessary.
Well, should the average player have any particular strategy in playing the irons?
Well, in a long iron shot particularly, I think that they have to consider what they're shooting at. The target can't be just the pin. I think that they have to consider hitting the green first of all.
Which brings us right up to the short irons. Where's the big mistake made with them?
Well, of course, with the short irons, we are not interested in distance, and our primary purpose in the short irons is the accuracy that we can get from them. So the body turn or the pivot is not as great. And I think that something that we can remember is we don't have to turn off the left heel. We can keep the left heel on the ground, still get enough body turn to hit the ball far enough with the short irons, and this will also give us much more accuracy.
Well, Arnie, now that we've hit the shot with the short irons, what's the secret to getting the ball to stop? The bite.
Well, Chris, of course, this goes back to hitting down and through the ball. And, of course, to get a lot of bite on the ball, keeping the club on the line of flight is very important. Now, the thing we want to do is come down on the ball. First of all, hitting down and through, keeping the club as long as possible on the line that we want the ball to get on. This will put bite on it and normally make it stop very fast.
Say, Arnie, is there any secret to club selection that the pros have and the average golfers do not have?
Well, I think there is, Chris. Yes, the club selection can be very important. Now, of course, we all know that we can carry 14 clubs in the bag, and that is pretty standard. Now, as to the lies that you get on a golf course and while you're playing around, there's nothing standard about this. The ball may be setting up one time, it may be setting down in the grass another. All these things have a great deal to do with the selection of the proper club. For an example, if the ball is setting down in the grass and there's grass completely surrounding the ball, when you hit this ball with an iron and the grass gets between the club face and the ball, there will be a tendency for the ball to fly, or as we say, you'll lose control of the ball. And of course the ball will go much further with the same club. For an example, let's take a 6-iron. With grass getting between the face of the club and the ball with a 6-iron, it will go maybe like a 5, where the same shot with the ball setting up and the contact is going to be direct. The ball will have that bite or that spin on it, and it will be much more accurate, and it will not fly as far. It could be as much as 10 to 20 yards in difference. So now, in selecting clubs, we have to consider the lie of the ball, the wind, and the wetness or dampness of the grass. A great many things do come into the selection, and of course, professionals are more apt to be familiar with the situation.
Arnie, you mentioned control a moment ago, and I realize the pros are able to hit the long irons, but few amateur golfers can hit them and control them.
Well, Chris, of course, one of the big things in discussing long irons and the average golfer is that the average golfer is, shall I say, a little afraid of the long irons. They're a little afraid that the ball may not get up into the air. And, of course, this is a common fault. It's something that they really shouldn't worry about. Hitting a long iron is just about the same as hitting a short iron. If they hit down and through and not try to hit the ball particularly hard, I think that they'll get good results. Now, of course, hitting these long irons is something that you hit down and through the same as you would with any other club and carry the swing on through. The reason that the control is not there is because they are trying to loft it. As I mentioned earlier, they're trying to hit the ball into the air rather than hit it down, which will eventually put it into the air in a good flight.
Arnie, you will have to admit, though, that it'll take all of us a great deal of time to hit the 1-iron the way you hit it.
Well, Chris, the 1-iron, of course, is one of my favorite clubs, and it has saved me a great many shots through the years. I hope it continues to. I like it because I can be more accurate with it, for an example, than I can with a 4-wood. I don't by any means suggest that the average player go to a 1-iron in preference to a 4-wood, because it takes practice and it takes a lot of time to perfect this club. However, this goes back to the old theory of hitting down and through the ball, and of course it helps to hit it hard and get through the ball well. And this is something that, shall we say, we work at.
And many, many hours at, I might add. By the way, at this point, I think you ought to give us a good checkpoint that we should all remember while hitting iron shots.
Well, of course, one of the most important things is the right elbow. keeping that elbow in close to the side will help with the accuracy. It'll cut down on the overswinging, which is a very common fault in hitting iron shots. And, of course, Chris, we mentioned earlier we have 14 clubs, so why not use all of them? Let's not try to hit a 4-iron when we could take a 3 and get the job done just as well and probably without half as much effort.
Arnie, I've heard you call the 5, 6, and 7 irons control clubs. Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, these clubs, of course, are really the important clubs in scoring in golf. They are probably the clubs that are used most. And control of these clubs can cut a golfer's score just tremendously. In other words, he can hit the green with these clubs, let's say, but if he's leaving himself 40 and 50-foot putts, it's almost like missing the green and having to chip the ball. So these are clubs that control is of the utmost importance. By that I mean we're trying to hit the ball in 12, 10, 5 feet from the holes where we have a chance through the law of averages to make 3 or 4 of these putts every 9 holes, and of course that is what's going to reduce the score.
And of course this all adds up to the tremendous pressure that you fellas have when you're on tour. And I'm wondering if you can compare the pressure of the tour with everyday competition at various golf courses.
Well, of course, you know, everybody likes to win playing golf. That's one of the things that, even though it's just playing a Sunday round of golf, you know, you want to win.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, the same thing applies to the pros out on the tour. And concentrating becomes very important. And, of course, I think that sometimes it's more important for the everyday golfer to win than it is the pros. At least I watch them and see what is happening. But concentration and getting the control on the clubs is the thing that's going to beat this, let's say, nervousness or whatever may occur. If a person is nervous, I've always found that if I concentrate really hard during a shot, I forget that I'm nervous.
Well, Arnie, you'd better let me have that 1-iron you're holding because you may want to use it on me after this next question. I don't know. But I know that you're an advocate of the high finish. Yet I've seen various pictures of you, Mr. Palmer, with the club at hip length or below when you've finished your swing. Now, how do you account for that?
Chris, I'm kind of glad you asked that question. Well, as a matter of fact, my swing, for all practical purposes, is a very high finish.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a recoil, you might say, that pulls the club back. Now, I have studied this, and I've wondered at times if it affected my game. And, of course, in taking movies of my swing or looking at pictures, I have realized that my swing is still high, but I pull the club back through force of habit. So I don't really feel badly about the question at all. I think that finishing high will make for good golf shots.
Arnie, are the shoulders always square when you're lining up an iron shot?
Well, no, Chris. As a matter of fact, when I'm dancing with my wife every once in a while, she says, why don't you stand square when you're dancing? And through the years playing golf, I've developed this high left shoulder and, of course, the low right shoulder. And this has come through trying to keep the right side under in swinging through a golf shot. And as a result, when I address the ball, my left shoulder is a little higher than the right, and it has carried right over into my private life.
I got to remember this because dancing with a 1-iron is pretty dull. Arnie, would you just sum up the checkpoints that we should all remember with the irons?
Well, Chris, I think that summing up the irons is a thing that we can go back to the basic fundamentals of the game, actually. A good, deliberate, slow start away from the ball is very important. Keeping the right elbow in these circumstances is very important. Keeping the swing compact, and particularly with the short irons and through the middle irons. And then when we get into the longer irons, of course, the arc of the swing has increased quite a bit. And this will allow us to hit the ball further, certainly. Now, There are a few things that I would like to mention in summing up the irons. First of all, I personally, for accuracy in the short and mid irons, try to keep my left heel on the ground, to cut down on the body turn, to keep my accuracy as much as possible. Now, when I get to, let's say, a 4-iron, I then start turning just slightly off the left side and maybe lifting the left heel just a little. And of course, with the 3, 2, and 1 irons, there is a very pronounced turning off the left side, which will cause the left heel to lift slightly off the ground to give me a larger arc or a longer arc and hit the ball a little further, and still keeping the right elbow in close and keeping the swing as compact as possible to get the accuracy with these irons that is necessary.
Turn to page 16 for Arnold's explanation of the recovery shots. First, Arnold will discuss the pitching wedge. Picture 1 shows the stance for a normal wedge shot.
For a normal pitch shot, the ball is positioned at a point midway between the feet. The stance is open.
Picture 2 shows how the ball is positioned when you want to hit the ball low with your wedge, such as against the wind.
For a low pitch against the wind, the ball should be positioned just off your right heel. The stance is still open. The face of the club is toed in or closed slightly.
The stance for a short pitch is shown in picture 3.
For a short pitch, the ball should be positioned just off the left heel. The blade of the club is laid slightly open, just the opposite of toeing it in or having it slightly closed.
Picture 4 shows the beginning of the backswing. Arnold explains how the wedge should be swung.
As the backswing is begun with the wedge, the wrists start to break sooner and in a more pronounced way.
Look at page 17. In picture 5, Arnold is shown at the top of the swing for a pitch.
The top of the backswing is reached with a minimum of body turn. The left heel never leaves the ground. The hand should go no higher than the level of your waist.
In picture 6, Arnold is shown at the finish of the pitch.
Even though the pitch is a very short shot, you must hit through the ball.
Next, on page 18, Arnold displays the technique of the trap shot. Picture 1 shows Arnold at the address.
The feet should be firmly planted in the sand. The hands should be held slightly ahead of the ball. The club face is laid open. Remember, the rules of golf do not permit you to ground the club at address, in a sand trap, or in a hazard.
Picture 2 gives another view of Arnold at the address.
The stance is very open.
Picture 3 shows Arnold at the beginning of the backswing of the trap shot.
The club head is taken back slowly outside the intended line of flight.
Now look at page 19. Picture 4 shows Arnold at the top of the backswing.
be sure to keep your left arm firm throughout the swing.
Picture 5 shows Arnold just after impact.
At impact, hit the sand an inch or two behind the ball, not the ball itself.
Picture 6 shows Arnold at the finish of the trap shot.
The surest way to ruin a trap shot is to quit on it. Be sure to hit through the sand and to make a complete follow-through.
We will now pause and resume our golf lesson on record number 1, side number 4. Well, Arnie, you ready to talk a little bit about the finesse part of the game?
I think so, Chris. Well, you might say I have a lot of opportunity to play these shots.
Don't we all? Anyway, on those short shots around the green, I noticed that you keep your head down long after you hit the ball. Why?
Well, Chris, this is a shot that requires a great deal of accuracy and finesse, and keeping your eye on the ball is very, very important. If you should move just a slight bit, and let's say hitting back of the ball the slightest fraction, you're going to leave it short or pitch it a little too far. And, of course, this is going to give you trouble, and it's not that long a shot that you can afford to miss it by 10 or 12 feet. And, of course, if the head is moving up or down, it's going to cause these troubles.
Arnie, is there any particular thing to keep in mind with the pitch shot?
Well, of course, we want to remember, and this is also very important, that is to hit the ball first. We want to get the ball and get as much of the club face on the ball as possible in hitting this shot. And, of course, be careful if you're trying let's say, a little lob shot or a shot you want to pitch up into the air, not to lay the face open too much and cut right under the ball.
Now, what about the hands and wrists? Should you add a little extra something?
Well, now, on certain pitch shots, Chris, they are played, let's say, with 90% hands and wrists and a slight movement of the arms. There's a great deal of wrist action in getting the ball into the air and, of course, hitting down on the ball with the loft on a wedge will pitch it into the air. And, of course, this has a great deal of hand and wrist movement in it.
Arnie, you mind taking a trip into the sand trap with me for a moment?
Well, we'll give it a try, Chris.
Well, let's say that we're in a bunker, and let's also suppose that the ball is buried. What in the world is the best way to get it out?
First of all, in playing a buried shot in a bunker, there are a number of things that you can do. First of all, a great many professionals, for an example, will play a buried bunker shot with a closed face. Now, of course, the ball will come out and will come out easier, let's say, with a closed-faced sand club. However, I prefer to play this shot with an open face. Now, earlier we mentioned sand shots and hitting down and through, but here is a shot that I sometimes pick a spot in back of the ball anywhere from 1/4 of an inch to 2 inches, depending on how deep the ball may be buried in the sand. And I lay the blade open, and I bury the club right into the sand in back of the ball, allowing the momentum of the club sinking into the sand and, of course, forcing the sand against the ball and lobbing the ball out. And on this particular shot, I do not worry too much about a follow-through. Now, if the ball is laying clean in a bunker, then I hit the sand and follow through very pronouncedly to lob the ball into the air and, of course, play the shot. As far as this chip shot out of the bunker, I do not approve of that, Chris.
You're making the sand shot sound pretty easy, Arnie, but it always seemed to me that that was the hardest shot in golf.
Well, actually, Chris, I think that a lot of times this sand shot is one of the easier shots in golf. When I miss a green, I sometimes prefer to play it out of the sand.
Well, is there any set rules for playing trouble shots?
No, there isn't, Chris, and I would say that trouble shots is a part of the game that really separates the real good scores from the poorer scores in golf. I think that trouble shot is a great deal instinct, and knowing what club to take to play a particular trouble shot, and then executing that trouble shot. Oh, well, we could take a shot of maybe 100 yards, and this shot would normally be played with, let's say, a 9-iron. We might, in a situation, use a 4-iron for this same shot. So, once again, I say that trouble shots are instinct shots to a great extent, and, of course, sizing up the trouble you're in.
By the way, is there one club that is best for trouble shots?
Well, I think, Chris, that you must consider the wedge the best all-around club for getting out of trouble. You know, they say a wedge is used for only certain distances, but I found myself using a wedge for just about every distance there is, and, of course, that's going from 5 yards to 150 yards. I think that this club can be used in so many different ways to save shots in a round of golf that it's just almost unbelievable. First of all, a wedge can be used for a cut shot. It can be used to hit a low shot with a lot of bite on it into a green. It can be used for the high lob shots into the green. It can be used for a little hook around a tree or a little cut around a tree. It can be used to just about any purpose you can think of, except possibly for a drive or a very long iron shot. So I think that for trouble shots, we must consider the wedge kind of a lifesaver.
Would you say it's easier to get closer from the rough around the green or from a sand trap?
Well, frankly, Chris, I think that given a reasonable lie in a sand trap, I would just as soon play the ball out of a sand trap than I would out of the deep rough around the greens.
Does this bring back any memories, let's say Cherry Hills in Denver?
Well, of course, there was a situation where I had some shots that I would have much rather played out of sand traps than I would have out of the rough.
Ernie, what causes a player to get in trouble the most? What club, I should say? Is it the driver or the long iron?
Well, I think the average player would have more trouble with his driver for the simple reason that a missed drive leads to a great many missed shots. For an example, he hits his drive in the rough, he tries to extend that second shot to the green, or he tries to push it just a little further than, let's say, that he's capable of doing under the circumstances, and he has found himself in a lot of trouble, where if he'd have taken the penalty or pitched the ball out with a shorter club, then hit his shot into the green, he would save quite a few shots.
Turn to page 20 for an explanation of the chip shot. Picture 1 shows Arnold at the address.
At the address of the chip, the stance is slightly open. The feet are very close together. The club is gripped at least 3 inches from the top of the shaft.
Picture 2 gives another view of Arnold at the address of the chip.
The ball is positioned just off the right toe.
Look at page 21. Picture 3 shows Arnold taking the club back for the chip.
With the chip, the hands and the arms should do all of the work. The body stays absolutely motionless.
Picture 4 shows Arnold at the finish of the chip.
The ball should be struck crisply. The follow-through is held to a minimum.
Turn to page 22. Arnold displays his putting technique. In picture 1, Arnold shows how the right hand should be placed on the club.
The club is held in the right hand so that the thumb points directly down the top of the shaft.
In picture 2, Arnold shows how the left hand should be placed on the shaft.
The thumb rides inside the right hand. The first finger of the left hand rides over the little finger of the right hand. This is what is known as the reverse overlapping grip.
In picture 3, Arnold is shown at the address with the putter.
The ball is placed closer to the left foot than it is to the right. The right arm is held very close to the side. To help keep your body steady, the knees are locked together. This can be a personal aspect of putting.
On page 23, in picture 4, Arnold is shown at the back of his putting stroke.
The head is kept absolutely steady throughout the stroke.
In picture 5, Arnold is shown at the finish of his putting stroke.
The follow-through of the putting stroke is accomplished by throwing the club face directly at the hole.
Well, Arnie, now that we're around the practice green, I really have a lot of questions for you, not only about putting, but also about chipping. In chipping, what would you say is the easiest mistake to make?
Well, Chris, let's chip a few balls here and see what happens.
All right.
And, of course, in doing this, probably one thing that I'll be very cautious about, and that is keeping my head down until the ball is well on its way to the hole. I'll be very careful not to lift my head, and, of course, I will try to keep the club going through towards the hole after I have chipped the ball.
Say, I noticed that you were chipping there with the wedge. Do you always do that?
Well, I like the wedge for chipping, although it's not probably the best club, particularly on a shot like we're playing right here where we want the ball to roll quite a ways. I really should be playing this shot with, maybe a 4 or 5 iron, just getting it on the edge of the green and, of course, allowing it to roll to the hole.
You've played some great shots with the 4 and 5 iron in such a situation.
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, some of the tournaments that I've played, and one in particular was at Denver in 1960. This was on the 18th hole, and, of course, the last hole of the championship, and I had to, at the time, I felt I had to get down in 2 to win the tournament. And I was in a little bit of rough, but I had a long way to go to the pin. So I took a 4 iron and just lobbed the ball onto the green. And, of course, the ball rolled some 65, 70 feet, and very fortunately for me, it ended up about 2 feet below the hole, and I was able to make the putt to win the tournament.
Well, if it's good enough for an Open champion, it's good enough for me. Now, is there some bit of advice that you could give us when chipping, besides the mechanics of the swing?
Well, of course, as I say, getting the ball just on the edge of the green, keeping the head down is very important. Choking the club, getting the club down where you feel like you have just the utmost control over the club head. It's a very slow backswing and a very deliberate hit. And, of course, you want to feel, Chris, almost like, well, let's just say I take the ball here in my hand and lob it up to the hole with my hand. And, of course, please, if you try this, don't do what one of my members did one day. I was showing him this shot, and he was having a little difficulty getting the idea of lobbing the ball onto the green and allowing it to roll. So I asked him to take it in his hand and kind of just lob it up there with his hand. And, gee whiz, the next thing I knew, he had thrown it back over his shoulder in the opposite direction, Chris. And, of course, this isn't what I mean, but that is the feeling you like to have in hitting a little chip, is to feel like you're just going to lob the ball up there with your hand. and you want to be doing this with the face of the club.
Well, now that you've got us chipped up very close, let's talk a little bit about putting. What's the worst thing that you can do with a putt?
Well, of course, you've heard this old expression many, many times, and that is, don't leave it short, because if you're not up, it's going to be pretty hard for that ball to get in the hole.
Arnie, occasionally you'll see a seasoned player miss a short putt. Now, what causes this?
Well, any number of things can cause it, Chris. I would say that a great many of them are missed by pure carelessness. Getting too confident in the fact that they can make this putt and not really taking it seriously. Now, of course, aside from this fact, there are a lot of things in the greens that sometimes will cause this. We're not interested in those right now particularly, but jerking putts. A putter will jerk the putter back too quickly sometimes and pull the putt or push it just slightly. These putts are very, very important, and of course, missing a short putt is just like missing a long drive. You know, they both count a shot. And of course, this short putt can save a lot of shots. So when we're putting them, we take our time, get the putt lined up, take a very deliberate stroke away from the ball, and then hit the ball firmly and hit it in the hole.
Well, here's a question that Arnie's Army will love to hear asked of you, because one of the reasons that so many people like to watch you play, Arnie, is the fact that you charge. Let's say in putting, you're noted as a charger. Now, do you always charge with your putts?
Well, Chris, I'm going back to that old saying, never up, never in. And I like to get the ball and up to the hole, give it a chance to get in the hole. Now, of course, when I first started playing the tour and playing tournament golf in general, I three-putted quite a bit. And, of course, I made a lot of putts coming back to the hole that a lot of players said, well, gee, this is just not the right way to go at it. But by having this education of going past the hole, as the years went on and I've played a lot of golf and I got more experience, I still am able to get the ball by the hole. And now, of course, I don't go by as much. So this is a very important thing for the beginner, I think. The beginner in putting, I think, should consistently putt the ball by the hole. Now, even if he three-putts, this is going to teach him that getting it by the hole will always give it a chance to go in the hole. And as he is more, well, let's say as he plays more golf, he will reduce this distance, and, of course, he will make more putts, and he will learn to make those short putts coming back. But if he's leaving it short of the hole, we know that that first putt isn't going to go in.
Well, Arnie, with all the fine instruction on golf you've given us, I realize that practice is very paramount and should be done often. About yourself, which club do you practice with the most?
Well, I think that I spend as much time around the greens and on the greens as I do anywhere on a golf course. Now, of course, I'm like any other player. I sure love to go out in the practice tee and hit those drives, or hit those 1-irons and 2-irons. This is a lot of fun, and sometimes it gets very, very boring to stand around the green and chip the ball or putt the ball. And, you know, you just you think, well, gee whiz, this isn't much fun. But when you get out in the course and you're chipping it up and getting it in the hole in 2 shots, it sure reduces the score and makes the game a lot more pleasurable. And, you know, it's sure a lot more pleasurable when you come into the clubhouse and you sit down and you have, let's say, 75 instead of 80 or 85.
Arnie, it's been really pleasurable absorbing the techniques of golf the way you've explained it. But I think all of us would like to hear just one brief summary of what we should always remember in playing this great game.
Well, Chris, thank you. And, of course, I, like many people in the world, think it is a great game. And to summarize just briefly some of the basic fundamentals and other points about the game that make it a great game, I think I would enjoy doing that right now.
Good.
And to start with, Let's say that we've gone through the grip and the stance and the drivers and the fairway woods and the long irons, short irons, chips and putts, trouble shots. In all of this, it really comes down to still the basic fundamentals of the game. Now, first of all, the grip. We must remember that the grip is one of the basic points of having a good golf game. So, folks, in practicing, remember, getting the hands on the club in the right position is very important. The stance, also a very important thing. And when it becomes a problem, check back and find out what's wrong and get it right. Don't go on doing the bad things with the stance or with the grip. And, of course, with the woods and irons, we know basically where they should be. And if we have troubles, let's not carry those troubles to the extent that we'll never get out of them. Let's stop and start over the right way. I think that before we make them too bad, they'll be a lot easier to correct. If you are having problems with your game and you think that this is serious, why not go back to the album and refer to the particular situation that will help you. As for the putting and chipping, this is pretty much an individual thing, and a lot of practice will help. And, of course, it's always nice in any of these problems to have your PGA professional give you a little advice. As for the other things in this game of golf, we must consider the etiquette of the game. It is a gentleman's game, and of course, these things must be considered. First of all, replace the divots that you dig out of a golf course. Fix the ball marks that you put in the greens. These things all make it nicer playing, better conditions, and so forth. And if you're in a sand trap and you leave a big hole in this sand trap, and it might be your father in back of you or your son, and he gets into this hole, he's not going to like it too well. So let's smooth over these holes that we put in the sand traps and, of course, make it more pleasant for the other people playing the game. We certainly hope that this album has helped your golf and will continue to make the game more enjoyable for you. And at this time, I'd like to thank you, Chris, for helping us on this record album, and I'm sure that everybody will enjoy hearing you.
Well, Arnie, just as you have helped us with our own game of golf, you have helped the game itself by being a tremendous champion on and off the course.